In what I hope to be a regular segment of this new show that we're doing here, Paul Fontaine is joining me. Very familiar voice to this network. And Paul, for my first, some of what I want to do with this show, the extra show, is we have one show covering UFC, we have one show covering boxing, and the rest is pro wrestling. Now, pro wrestling really is what is driving our network, so I don't want to say anything negative about that, but I do like the idea of having more MMA, more boxing talk, because that's also more of my personality, what I like, even though I am so deep into this pro wrestling stuff at this point. And one of the segments I thought about was you and I doing a quick segment, and hopefully, maybe for every big UFC, every UFC pay-per-view, where we quickly talk about some of the storylines of the fight. But then I also, and this is most importantly to me, we are not a betting show, we are not a betting network, we don't have a betting website, but I like the idea of you using statistics to help, when you do your picks. So I also want to get, your 2 or 3 best picks for this show, and we can kind of talk about them as we go if we continue to do this. So
Sure.
First off, thanks for joining. And secondly, quickly talk about this show upcoming. It kind of snuck up on me like a lot of the UFCs have been doing of late. But we have Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira in a rematch. And it's amazing to me how similar this storyline is to the Usman and Leon Edwards storyline, in that, does Pereira have Adesanya's number? And based off of 3 fights, the answer is yes. But I remember vividly watching this fight the last time and thinking that if Adesanya fought a little bit more smartly late, he probably would have cruised to a decision. But that was not the case. And it sort of reminded me, Robert Silva would love this comparison. Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, the first time, not Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, the first time they fought, Roberto Duran was in Sugar Ray Leonard's head so much so that Leonard decided to fight his fight and stood in there and slugged away. And then when he figured out, okay, that was really stupid, second fight, he fought his fight and Duran quit. And I kind of wonder, because I saw your pick, you're picking Pereira, and I think I'm going Adesanya for the one factor of he has learned more about that fight. He's probably watched it more than anybody. And he knows that there are moments that, as an MMA fighter, it's an entertaining sport. You need to mix it up. He can score points, but he also needs to not get stalked and cut off so easily, which is what happened later in that fight. And so I think I'm picking Adesanya. But man, that 3-0 versus 3-0 between the two of them, that really stands out. And what was your decision behind picking Pereira?
Okay, so and for those that don't know, the first 2 fights happened under kickboxing rules.
Yes.
In Glory, and so in 2016, Adesanya lost the decision, and in 2017, March 2017, Alex Pereira knocked Israel Adesanya out in the 3rd round. The only time up until their first MMA fight that Adesanya has ever been knocked out in competition. So I had a different feeling watching that first fight. Yes, Adesanya was cruising to a decision win. He, the stoppage came late, early in the 5th round, but I mean, it kind of came almost out of nowhere. And you're right, it was very similar to the first Usman Edwards fight, except the fight was a lot closer than the Usman Edwards fight. Like, Edwards was dominating, like, there's no question. Pereira actually outstruck Adesanya, but Adesanya was winning the rounds because his strikes were more impactful and he was controlling, and he was winning the rounds, but they were close. But my thought watching was, you got to remember that Pereira is literally about 2 years into his MMA career at this point. He's only fought in the UFC. This will be his 5th fight. 5th fight in the UFC. So that was his 4th fight. I'm watching this fight and I'm like, man, if they fight again in a year, Pereira's trouble with that name.
I know for
Pereira's,
us, it looks
yeah,
like we just want to call him Pereira because
yeah,
that's just how we. But I
yeah.
keep
It's
hearing everyone
Pereira.
say Pahea,
Yeah, so I'm
and
gonna
so I'm
say
trying
Pereira.
that it's not working with my mouth very
Yeah,
well though.
Pereira. I'm thinking Pereira is going to dominate if they fight again in a year. So the fact that they're rematching this soon is good for Adesanya. And I talked with Ryan Frederick on our regular podcast on the Fight Game Media free feed, and he said the same thing. And I think he's leaning Adesanya
He
like
picked
you.
he in our picks, the Fight
Yeah,
Game Media picks. He did take Adesanya.
but yeah, and I do think, like, again, it's if they would have fought 6 months from now, I think, Pahea's getting better and better, and the training and everything, like, he's learning to become a mixed martial artist. And if they had fought another, like, if let's say he had defended the title once and then fought Adesanya, I would be strongly leaning towards Bahia. So the reason I'm picking Bahia is mainly for the odds. And we'll get into that, in when we talk about best bets. But I mean, your picks that we do for the panel,
They're
it's just
just
straight
ups,
up.
yeah.
But I'm kind of like, I'm also using strategery, and thinking that, most people are going to pick Adesanya, so I want to go against the grain. So if Bahia wins, I'll be the only one. But I do think, like, I think even if it was even money, I'd be going with Bahia.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just don't like, Bahia, Adesanya, you're giving a little bit of money, but the odds have closed up. It's I think it's minus 120 right now plus 120 for Pahea and minus 140 for Adesanya. And earlier in the week, I think he was minus 185.
Oh wow.
So the odds are switching. The late money moves the lines a lot more in MMA than it does in other sports. So people usually place bets after the weigh-ins.
Yes, that's what I was wondering as well.
Yeah.
Is we also have to see how these guys look tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's another fight, and I don't even know what to think of Jorge Masvidal at this point. This looks like he still has a name, so let's utilize that name. Gilbert Burns, he has just been more active. He's just been better of late. Masvidal had only fought really big time opponents, so it's not like he was losing to nobodies here. But is the expectation for you as well that Burns kind of runs through Masvidal, and Masvidal is probably one of his last rides?
I think so. I mean, the reason this fight was made was to sell tickets in Miami.
Yes.
This is the first time UFC's been in Miami since 2003.
Great draw for them.
Yeah, the King of Miami, right? And there's also the possibility, if he happens to get like a flash knockout like he did over Ben Askren, on UFC, that was all over ESPN for a couple years, really, and skyrocketed him into stardom. Like, they can put him right in a title fight, and he's got a ready-made feud with Leon Edwards that started years back on a pay-per-view. So
slapgate.
Yeah, and then he jumped right over Colby Covington, which, again, those two have a big feud too. So if he happens to pull off this upset, I mean, UFC is going to cash in, or I guess ESPN will cash in, because UFC gets their money either way.
This fight, not necessarily this fight, but I really want to watch the main event. Mm-hmm. Usually when it comes to UFC, I just go over to Dave's, but I don't think, we have a pretty busy Saturday, and I may not even be able to watch this live. For the first time, I may have to fork out the $80 here. This will be my first $80 UFC pay-per-view, but I'm thinking about it because I think the main event is too many great stories around it, and I want to see, can Adesanya overcome the one guy? That's always a great storyline. So, all right, and also I just wanted to point out, young Rojas is fighting on this show. So
yeah, it'll kick off the main card. 18 years old. Youngest fighter in UFC history. Got a contract when he was 17. And he's incredible. He looks like he's 25, and he speaks like he's 25. Like, he's just amazing. This card is stacked. Like,
even the undercard, there's nice name fighters on the undercard.
Yeah, former, like, Kelvin Gastelum, former tough winner, and is on the prelims. Michelle Watterson.
She's ripped. I've been watching her videos of her getting in shape. She's in great shape.
Even Cynthia Calvillo is on the early prelims. Like, it's a deep card.
Yeah, she's on the ESPN Plus fight and Fight Pass stuff. Okay, so I want you to give me I don't know, your 2 or 3 favorite picks based off of this math that you've created,
Yep.
your
Yeah.
ROI, your return on investment picks here. So
Yep.
give me 3
Yep.
and we'll end it with that.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, it's basically the when I use ROI, it's every we'll say $100 that you bet, you'll get back your 100 plus the percentage of whatever you bet. So when you say a guy's got a 50% ROI, you're getting 50% profit on your money. So whatever you bet, historically based on previous fights, you're getting this back. So the 3 that I have are actually the main event. Alex Pereira, 72.8% ROI. He's a plus 120 underdog, and he's only 1-0 as an underdog, and that was obviously the previous fight.
Yes.
But he's also had good value as a favorite. The second pick is on the prelims, Gerald Mearshart, who he's been around for a long time. He's fought some big fights, and he's a guy that people tend to overlook. In fact, I only go back 10 fights for ROI, and he's been an underdog in 9 of his 10 fights, but he's 5-4 as an underdog.
Yeah.
So, and he's plus 155 here. So I think he's getting great value. The only thing that I don't like is he's fighting Joseph Pfeiffer, who is actually a guy that's been getting a lot of buzz. He won a fight on Dana White's Contender Series to win a contract. And there was a phrase, be like Joe Pfeiffer, that Dana White said, because everyone else on that show won by decision. So yeah, I think UFC wants Joseph Pfeiffer to win, but Mearshart has upset people before. And then my third pick is Trey Ogden. He's on the early prelims, and he's going up against Ignacio Bahamondes. And Trey's a plus 245 underdog, but he's won both of his fights previously when he was an underdog. So he's got a 55.9% ROI. So yeah, Alex Pereira, Gerald Mearshart, and Trey Ogden are your 3 best bets.
All right. When is UFC 288 here?
I believe it is in May. And
Sterling and Cejudo is May 6th.
Yeah, and then there's I think they got an undercard fight as well.
Charles Oliveira and Dariush. Bryce
Yeah.
Mitchell's on that show.
Yeah, that one's not a super big card. I think we may still get a fight added. That's the one from New Jersey that actually Ryan Frederick was the first one to break.
Yes,
they were going to New Jersey. Yeah. I think we may get Frankie Edgar announced for the Hall of Fame on that show.
Oh, that'll be really cool.
Yeah. That's just a theory Ryan and I have, but makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so why don't we do this? You probably have a notepad there. Just keep those picks on the notepad, and then when we come back before 288 on this show, we'll go over your picks and see how you did, and we can talk about UFC 288 as well.
Yeah, and if you're in the Discord, I usually post my ROI picks for the whole card. So
this for Larry Caution.
Basically just Larry. But no, there's a few other people that have told me. James Perry, he's
there you go.
Loyal listener, yeah. But yeah, I'll put those in the Fight Game Media Discord for free. I usually put them up on the morning of the show, and you can bet along with me if you like. There was one card not that long ago where I was like 12 out of 13.
Jeez.
Yeah, made a lot of money that week.
Nice job.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, if you want to hear the full preview of UFC 287, Paul Fontaine, Ryan Frederick in the clinch, maybe the most underrated podcast in our network, just because it's an MMA show surrounded by pro wrestling shows, but definitely check that out. That usually goes up Tuesday afternoon every week. So check that podcast out. And then if you want to follow along, Paul and Ryan often get their tweets often show up on the television. So why don't you give your Twitter and Ryan's Twitter if people want to follow you guys on Fight Night?
Yeah, that's at Paul Ace Fontaine, and Ryan is at Ryan J. Frederick. Ryan's always there right from the start of the show, so he'll be on the early prelims. I usually check in when the main card's starting, and but we'll get our tweets, our round scores, and I usually I'll throw in comments. Sometimes I word them specifically to get on TV, but occasionally I screw up the hashtag. In fact, that happens like every second show.
All right. Thanks, Paul, for kicking us off here on the debut episode of the Fight Game Podcast Extra. And we'll check you out, and you'll be heard of again on this show